The evening came softly to the edge of the Carpathian forest, as if it were walking barefoot through moss. A pale mist rested between the fir trees, and every needle held a tiny drop of silver light. Far below, in a small wooden hut with a sloping roof, a warm fire breathed inside the stove. It did not crack loudly. It only glowed, patient and golden, like a sleepy eye watching over the room. On the bench near the stove sat old Baba Marusia, wrapping a woolen shawl around her shoulders. Beside her, a clay cup of linden tea steamed quietly. The scent of honey, dry mint, and warm wood filled the hut. Outside, the wind moved through the forest with a long, gentle sigh, and the moon rose slowly above the black backs of the mountains. People in nearby villages liked to tell horror stories on nights like this. They spoke of shadows by the river, footsteps in empty barns, whispers in the reeds. But Baba Marusia knew that many such stories were only frightened thoughts wearing dark coats. If one listened carefully, truly carefully, the night was not eager to scare anyone. The night only wanted to be understood. That evening, a small traveler knocked at her door. It was not a child and not quite a spirit, but something in between. A pottercha, a pale little wanderer of the twilight with eyes like dew on grass. He wore a cap made from a fallen leaf and held a twig lantern that shone with blue glowworm light. "May I sit by your stove?" he asked softly. "Of course," said Baba Marusia, and she moved the stool closer to the warmth. The pottercha climbed up and stretched his tiny hands toward the fire. For a while they said nothing. The stove hummed. The rafters smelled of smoke and dried apples. Somewhere behind the wall, the domovik turned in his little nest near the threshold, pleased that all was peaceful. After a long silence, the little wanderer whispered, "In the marsh, they tell horror stories about houses. They say houses creak and sigh, and shadows move behind windows." Baba Marusia smiled into her tea. "Houses do sigh," she said. "Old wood remembers summer rain, winter frost, and all the footsteps it has carried. When it creaks, it is only telling itself it is still here." The pottercha listened, and his lantern dimmed to a calmer blue. At that moment, outside near the well, a soft rustling passed over the grass. A mavka stepped from the mist, her hair pale green in the moonlight, her dress woven from the breath of leaves. She did not come near the window. She only paused to look at the warm glow of the hut, as forest spirits sometimes do when they enjoy remembering human songs. Farther away, near the dark line of trees, a chugester danced slowly between the trunks. His steps were large but gentle, turning the fog into soft spirals. He was the guardian of lonely paths, and though his shape might seem strange to anyone walking too quickly through the woods, tonight he moved like a grandfather, swaying to music heard only by the hills. The little pottercha noticed him and tucked his chin into his collar. "Is he part of a horror story?" he asked. "No," said Baba Marusia. "He is part of a forest story. Those are older and kinder when heard by a calm heart." The moon climbed higher. The shadows in the corners of the hut grew deep and blue, but they stayed where they were, resting like folded blankets. The domovik gave a tiny snore beneath the stove. A dry herb bundle moved slightly from the beam, stirred by warmth. Baba Marusia began to speak in a low voice, not quite singing, not quite telling. She told of a rusalka who combed her long hair beside a river, not to lure anyone away, but to untangle moonbeams caught in the reeds. She told of a lisovik who guided lost sheep home by bending branches toward the right path. She told of a molfar high in the mountains who whispered to storm clouds until they softened into rain for the thirsty fields. The pottercha's eyelids grew heavy. Outside, the mavka slipped back into the trees. The chugaster's slow dance faded into mist. The well, the garden, the forest, and the mountains all seemed to breathe together. "So," murmured the little traveler, already half asleep, "horror stories can become gentle?" "When the fire is warm," Baba Marusia whispered, "and the listener is safe, even the darkest tale may take off its heavy cloak and lie down beside the stove." The blue twig lantern went out, but the room did not become dark. The embers held a soft red light. Snowy stars watched through the small window. And over the quiet hut, over the misty forest, over all the hidden paths of night, peace settled slowly like a warm shawl over tired shoulders. For a long while, nothing moved except the embers breathing in the stove. Then from somewhere deep in the warm clay of the hearth, there came the tiniest sound, like a seed turning in the earth. The domovik, who had been curled behind a bundle of dried mint, opened one round eye. He was no taller than a loaf of bread, with a beard soft as flax and slippers made from old felt. He listened, nodded to himself, and crept closer to the sleeping traveler. The pottercha did not wake, it only sighed, and in that sigh there was still a little trace of the road, of dark tales heard from careless mouths, of shadows given sharp teeth by frightened voices. The domovik dipped his fingers into the ash, where warmth still lived under the gray, and drew a small circle on the hearthstone. Inside the circle he marked a little gate, a little moon, and a little path leading home. "There," he whispered, so quietly that only the house could hear. "Let every uneasy dream find its way to the door and forget why it came." The house answered with a gentle creak of beams. In the corner, dry apples hanging from a string gave off their sweet, drowsy scent. A clay jug cooled on the shelf. The old icons beneath embroidered towels watched with calm, golden faces, as if they too had heard many winter nights pass by and knew that morning always came softly. Outside, the mist had thickened over the garden. It lay low among the cabbages and bare raspberry canes, silver in the starlight. Beyond the fence, the path to the forest seemed to vanish and appear again, as paths often do at night when they are dreaming of footsteps. From that path came a tall, quiet shape. It was the lisovik, the forest keeper, with moss on his shoulders and pine needles tangled in his beard. He did not knock, for forest folk know how to visit without disturbing sleep. He simply stood by the gate and leaned on his crooked staff, listening to the little hut breathe. Behind him, between the birches, the mavka returned. Her hair shone faintly, green as young leaves under water. She carried no sorrow tonight, only a folded hush gathered from the deepest glades, where even owls rest their wings. She spread it over the fence like a linen cloth. The lisovik smiled under his beard. "Will the child dream peacefully?" she asked, though her voice was hardly more than the sound of snow beginning to melt. "The house has taken the dream in," said the lisovik. "The stove will warm it. By dawn it will be harmless as smoke." "And the horror stories?" He looked toward the window, where the red light of the embers trembled. "They are tired too," he said. "They have wandered a long way, dressed in black coats, trying to frighten the wind. But here they will sit on the bench, drink milk with honey, and remember they were once only stories about the dark asking to be understood." The mavka lowered her eyes. In the garden, frost brightened the tips of dead grasses. Far away in the Carpathians, under folds of blue night, the mountains slept with clouds tucked around their shoulders. Then the Chugister came, slow and pale among the trees, his white hair floating like thistle down. He lifted one foot, then another, not dancing now, only stepping carefully so the frozen leaves would not crack too loudly. He had gathered burrs from his sleeves and left them for the mice to line their nests. "Is there room for one more quiet watch?" he asked. "There is always room for quiet," said the Lisovic. So they stood together by the fence, forest keeper, Mavka, and gentle Chugaister, while inside the hut Baba Marusia slept in her chair with her knitting folded in her lap, and the pottercha slept near the stove, wrapped in warmth and the soft smell of herbs. In its dream, the little traveler saw a dark forest, but the darkness was velvet, not fear. Between the trees hung tiny lanterns made of dew. A path opened, and on the path walked all the stories that had once seemed frightening. None of them hurried. None of them called out. They carried bowls of warm porridge, bundles of dry wood, and small candles cupped carefully in their hands. And wherever they passed, the night grew gentler. Beyond the dream path, the forest opened into a small clearing where the snow had not yet fallen, though winter was listening nearby. The grass there was silver with frost, and every blade bent gently beneath the moon, as if bowing to the old hush of the world. In the middle of the clearing stood a low table made from a fallen beech branch, polished smooth by rain and years. Around it sat the quiet figures of evening tales, not dreadful at all, only old and patient and full of weather. A rusalka combed her long green hair with a willow twig, and each stroke made the sound of a stream passing over pebbles. She smiled at the little pottercha as it came closer in the dream, and she pointed to a seat made of moss. A domovic, no larger than a bundle of straw, set down a cup of warm milk. His beard was full of flour, as though he had just climbed out of a bread bin. Beside him, a molfar from the high Carpathian meadows tied a red thread around a sprig of thyme, not for magic that startled, but for the kind that remembers where home is. "Sit and rest," said the molfar, his voice low as distant thunder after rain has gone. Even old stories need rest. So the pottercha sat. The cup warmed its small hands. Around the clearing, the trees leaned closer, but only to listen. No branch creaked sharply. No owl cried out. The night kept its breath soft. The rusalka began to tell of rivers under starlight, where fish dreamed in silver circles and reeds whispered names of clouds. The domovik told of kitchen corners where crumbs were never lonely, and of stoves that held the sun long after sunset. The Chugister, standing at the edge of the clearing, hummed an old mountain tune with no words, just a rocking sound, back and forth, like a cradle. And the stories that people called horror stories came and sat down too. They removed their dark cloaks and folded them neatly. Underneath, they were only worries that had traveled too far without sleep. One was the creak of a gate in the wind. One was a shadow cast by a hanging coat. One was the sound of rain in an empty lane. The Lisovic gave them each a place near the mossy table, and the Mavka placed a dewdrop lantern before them, so their edges grew soft and clear. "Ah," said the gate creak, settling down, "I was only asking to be oiled." "I was only cloth," sighed the hanging coat. "I was only rain," whispered the empty lane. And soon it was not empty at all, for moonlight walked there, and the scent of wet earth, and the memory of footsteps returning home. In the hut, Baba Marusia stirred in her sleep and smiled. The fire in the stove sank lower, red beneath gray ash, breathing out a warmth that filled every corner. A kettle cooled on the shelf. Dried mint and chamomile hung from the beam, moving just a little in the rising air. Outside, the fence, the well, the apple tree, and the path to the forest all lay under the same soft darkness, held together by quiet. The pottercha's dream grew lighter. The clearing faded into mist, and the old figures became stars between branches. The rusalka returned to her river, trailing a song like water over stone. The domovik tucked a crumb into his pocket and slipped back beneath the threshold. The molfar lifted his hand toward the mountains, where dawn was still far away, but already thinking of coming. The Chugeister brushed frost from the path with his gentle feet, making it easy for every wandering thought to find its way home. At last, only the Mavka remained beside the sleeping little one. She bent down and laid a leaf, green though it was late in the year, near its cheek. "Sleep," she whispered. "The night is wide, but it is kind." The word kind drifted through the hut, through the rafters and the warm ash, through Baba Marusia's folded hands, through the small, dreaming heart beside the stove. It drifted out through the chimney with a ribbon of smoke and rested above the roof among the stars. And there the night stayed, calm and deep, until every shadow had softened, every tale had grown drowsy, and the whole quiet world seemed to breathe in, breathe out, and sleep.